Hello, my name is Paul LeBlanc, and today I will be discussing the functions of behavior. Now, this presentation is intended to be a parent training for parents who are not familiar with the functions of behavior and are new to ABA. But if you are not a parent, you may enjoy this presentation and it may prove to be a good resource for you. So with that, let's begin. So before we start talking about functions as they relate to behaviorism, let's talk about what functions are in any context. So the function of something is its purpose. It is what a person, place, or thing is meant to do or to accomplish. So if we take this idea and we apply it to behaviors, the functions of a behavior are its purpose, what it sets out to do, the reason a person engages in a behavior, or what they hope to accomplish or gain by engaging in that behavior. So functions can be broken down into 4 different categories. There are other categories, subcategories that still fall under the umbrella of these core fundamental categories, but we're only going to be talking about the 4 fundamental categories, and those are tangible, attention, escape, and automatic. Now, next here, we're going to go ahead and break down what each of these are and provide examples of each. So to begin, let's talk about tangible functions in behavior. So behaviors with a tangible function occur so that the individual can gain access to something in their environment. And this could be anything. This could be a toy. It could be like some kind of an electronic, like an iPad, a cookie, a snack, or some other food. Really anything in the environment that the person does not already have access to, and therefore they have motivation to engage in this behavior to gain access to it. So, for example, a child cries after her parent refuses to buy her a toy during a trip to the store. So in this example, the child is crying because she wants to have the toy, but she was denied access. So now she's crying. That gives us a lot of confidence that the child is crying for a tangible function. They're trying to get that toy and they're upset that they do not have it. The parent may ultimately get the child a toy just to stop the crying. And if the crying stops once the child is given access to that toy they were originally denied, you can have a lot of confidence that indeed the function of the behavior was tangible. So let's go ahead and move on to the next function, which is attention. Behaviors with an attention function occur so the individual can gain the attention of another individual. So before we move on to the example, I just want to go over this idea that not all attention is good attention, yet it may still be reinforcing. Sometimes getting yelled at is better than being bored without any social stimulation at all. Here I wrote, attention can not only be reinforcing to an individual if it is friendly or in the form of play or praise, but it can also be reinforcing if the individual is being yelled at or scolded. So behavior is sometimes very complex. That's not to say that children or any child enjoys being yelled at, although I'm sure that is possible. It's just saying that perhaps that is more reinforcing than a complete lack of social attention. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to an example that you might find in a typical school classroom. A student makes a loud raspberry noise, like a moments after the class was told to work quietly. Now, this student has a history of disruptive behavior, an extensive history, and so he's aware that his noise will likely cause other students to laugh, and he will likely be scolded by his teacher, but he does it anyway. So the student is likely engaging in this behavior because he wants social attention from his peers and possibly the attention from his teacher as well, even though it comes in the form of a scolding. The student stops making noises once the other students begin laughing and the teacher begins scolding because the function of behavior, attention, has been satisfied. He has no reason to engage in these behaviors because now he's got everybody's attention. He's the main act. So now that we've covered the attention function, let's go ahead and move on to escape. So behaviors with an escape function occur so that the individual can avoid or escape from something in their environment. They want to avoid something that is unpleasant to them. Things that someone might want to avoid could be an unwanted person, an object that they don't like, maybe it's a sensation or an activity. Just to give an example of a sensation you might not find pleasant, perhaps some people don't like whenever there's really loud noises in an environment, so they may decide to move away from the source of the loud noises or even cover their ears so that they no longer have to experience that uncomfortable sensation. So to give another example, a child who is afraid of the dentist begins to cry when they realize their parent has just driven them to a dentist appointment. This child engages in this behavior because they want to avoid the dentist. The child continues to cry throughout the appointment because the function, escape, has not been satisfied. The parent kept their foot down and the child had to get their teeth cleaned, but the child was not happy about it throughout the entire experience. And so because the function wasn't met, they continued to remain upset throughout. Now, the reason why I made this example another example that involves a child crying is because I wanted to show that crying, although it may look the same to the observer, it can have different functions. And you would only know that by looking at the context and doing a little bit of functional analysis. So just here, a couple slides ago, this child was crying because they wanted a toy. And this child's crying because they wanted to avoid the dentist. So it's very important that we pay close attention to what is happening in the environment immediately before the behavior occurs, what we refer to as the antecedent of the behavior. And that way we can determine the function and treat it appropriately. More on how to treat these behaviors based on functions in a couple of slides. The last function is automatic. So behaviors with an automatic function occur because the individual experiences some kind of relief or pleasure from engaging in the behavior. The important thing to note is that automatic behaviors are not socially mediated. They do not require another person to be involved in any sort of contingency in order for the person to be reinforced by engaging in the behavior. So, for example, Hillary enjoys singing during her long commute to and from work. Hillary sings in her car, little typo there, in her car, whether or not other people are present. Hillary does not gain any apparent tangible attention or escape as a result of her singing, but she continues to engage in the behavior every day regardless. So we can have a lot of confidence that because there is nobody else influencing the reinforcement here, and it's something that she engages in all by herself, well, it's probably an automatic function. It's something that she does out of pure enjoyment. It is reinforcing in itself, and that's where the term automatic comes from. So moving on, extinction. Extinction procedures are very commonly used to reduce how often a behavior occurs. Now, the word extinction refers to the elimination of the reinforcer that is maintaining the behavior. So we figure out the function, we figure out an object or stimulus, something in the environment that the function is trying to get that individual towards, and then we eliminate it. The reinforcer is going to go extinct, so that function cannot be satisfied, and they're going to have to find another way to satisfy those behaviors. More on that later. The type of extinction procedure that is used will depend on the function of the behavior that is being targeted. So it is important that we look at behaviors from a behavior analytic point of view so we can confidently and reliably determine the function of the behavior based on evidence, and then we can create an appropriate function-based treatment for that. But I'm going to give some examples of different extinctions we might use in the next slide here. So this example is going to be 2 slides long because it was a lot of text. I will read through it and explain as we go along. So in this example, I wanted to try to describe one behavior that may have both a tangible function and an escape function, because a lot of times those two come in pairs, and this will give you a very good idea of how you might treat it, even though at the same time, taking into consideration both functions. So let's meet Timmy. Timmy is a young boy who is told he cannot have a cookie until he finishes eating his vegetables. In response, he pushes his plate away, folds his arms, and says, "No, I want a cookie now." Based on the information above, it is likely that Timmy is protesting because he wants the cookie, but also because he does not want to finish eating his vegetables. It is difficult to determine the primary function of Timmy's protest without a functional analysis, which is a way that behavior analysts can determine with greater precision exactly what the function of a behavior is so that we can determine an appropriate treatment. However, based on this information, we can be confident that his protest has both a tangible and escape functions, and we can work with that information. It is, after all, possible to have two functions happening at the same time. So in order to carry out a tangible extinction with Timmy, the parent will withhold the cookies until Timmy stops protesting. So he will not receive the tangible reinforcer, which is the cookie, as a result of protesting. Therefore, the behavior is no longer being maintained by access to the cookie, and Timmy will be less likely to protest in the future. Timmy will learn that protesting did not lead to a cookie, and so maybe engaging in another behavior will have a more satisfying outcome for him. In order to carry out escape extinction with Timmy, the parent will withhold the cookies and maintain the demand to finish eating until Timmy finishes eating his vegetables. So even though Timmy is protesting, he will not be allowed access to any other reinforcers, including the cookie, until he finishes eating his vegetables. So escape extinction, he will not, all of the avenues of escape have been eliminated. There's nothing else he can do until he completes the task that was placed upon him by the parent. Continuing along here, Timmy will be less likely to avoid eating his vegetables in the future now that he has realized that protesting and trying not to eat them does not result in any escape. He still has to do it. The demand was maintained by the parent, and it would have been easier for him from the start to just go ahead and finish eating his veggies. Then he could get the cookie and move on to another activity entirely. So at this one, you can see that both functions are very similar and the way that they are treated are similar. So the parent, by withholding the cookie and maintaining the demand, they're being very effective parents in treating this behavior. Timmy will be less likely to engage for either reason, for either function in the future, thanks to this parent's very tactful consequence that they came up with here. So now let's talk about replacement behaviors. So you've gotten rid of the behaviors, or you've reduced the behaviors with your extinction procedures, but this learner still has an incentive to engage in some kind of a behavior because their functions, their needs are still needing to be met. They still desire these things, and they do not have a replacement behavior, something that they can do as an alternative to see their needs met. This is where replacement behaviors come in. So anytime a behavior is targeted for reduction, another behavior must be taught which satisfies the same function as the original. Teaching a replacement behavior which adequately satisfies the function will help ensure that the reduction or elimination of the original behavior is maintained. This is because the learner has a new, appropriate, and effective skill to see their needs met. They will be less likely to go back to throwing tantrums or crying to get what they want if they know a more effective way to go about getting those things. One of my favorite examples of a replacement behavior is functional communication. This is often the difference between children and adults. Adults don't need to throw tantrums because we have other ways to see our needs met. And the most common one of those is speaking. So let's talk about functional communication here. In functional communication, the learner can request access to whatever it is they need through functional means, such as speaking or gesticulating. A simple point to indicate that you want something is certainly more universally acceptable and understood than just crying. It's likely that only a parent who knows a learner very well would know what certain cries mean, if there is any way to discriminate between a child's cries. By teaching them a more universal means of functional communication, more than just the parents can help the child, and that child will be they'll have less of a reason to engage in crying or screaming. Another example of a replacement behavior is following a schedule. In following a schedule, the learner is able to anticipate how long they will be engaged in each activity, and at the same time, they'll be able to anticipate when reinforcement will be available. So, because it seems a little less arbitrary to them, they will be less incentivized to engage in a behavior because they know how to follow a schedule and they know when the fun things are going to be coming up and what needs to be done before then. The next one on my list is token economy. So in a token economy, the learner completes a task to earn tokens, kind of like how we complete tasks at our work so that we can eventually earn our wage. Later, they can exchange their tokens for reinforcement. So this can be very effective at increasing time at the table or doing some kind of a less preferred task of the learner, because they know that by doing these less preferred things, they earn these tokens, and these tokens can be exchanged for something they really like. So related to token economy, but a little bit expanded upon, would be self-management. So in self-management, the learner maintains self-awareness of their behaviors, and they record instances of those behaviors. And this can be used in different ways. Perhaps the child engages in talking out loud in class when they shouldn't be talking. This would be a behavior to be targeted for reduction. We would want to make that happen less. So they would record how many times it happens. And if we would set up criteria, if it happens less than this many times per hour, they would then gain access to reinforcement. Now, another way self-management can be used is we want to see an increase in behavior. For example, we want this child to start doing their chores without being told. So they would engage in those chores without being told, and they would record anytime they engaged in those chores and completed them. And once they complete a certain number of chores for the week, or if they complete all of their chores for the week without having to be told, then they would gain access to the reinforcer. So this is very personal. It can be used for a variety of things, and it creates an incentive for the child to either engage in wanted behaviors more often, or maybe not engage in undesirable behaviors too often. So it's a very dynamic thing, and it's a good skill for a person to have, especially as they reach adulthood, to be able to manage their own behavior, just like you and I do. So that will do it for our presentation. On the screen now are some references where I got a lot of the materials for this. So I'll leave it up there for a few moments. You can pause the presentation if you'd like to see them longer. But for now, I'd like to thank you for attending and wish you a good day. Take care.